If you're ready to dive into the heart of what feminine embodiment really is, explore some of the skills and the techniques that practitioners need, together with myself and our school, who's supported over 900 participants to deepen their own personal practice and build professional livelihoods that are really rooted in service, then you're in the right place. A really warm welcome. I'm Jenna Ward, and today we're here for a tour of the Feminine Embodiment Coaching certification of our school and really unpacking the constellation of what type of feminine or embodiment or somatic training we are, so that you can distill where we sit in the night sky, where you are drawn to, if this is a fit or if it's not. And all of that is welcome. Welcome for those of you who are here joining us live. Hello. And if you're catching the recording, the majority of the 300 plus people who are registered for this event are catching us for the recording. A warm welcome where you are as well. I'm joining from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, where our headquarters are based. And welcome to Janice from Vancouver. We'd love to know where you're joining from if you're here with us live. And I'd also love to know what drew you here to this session today. Maybe you have a curiosity around embodiment and wanting to go deeper into that yourself personally. That's a big piece of the puzzle that calls a lot of women into our work. Maybe you've had really rich personal experiences of remembering and of devotion, and you want to share that with other bodies, but you're looking for some structures, some language, some tools to actually be able to do that really effectively and safely. Maybe you're contemplating a shift in profession or a new career path, or maybe you're already a practitioner who's looking to go deeper and to have some more somatic and devotional tools in your tool belt to work with your clients. If any of those describe you, then you're in the right place, and a really warm welcome. For those of you that I haven't had the privilege to meet before, I'm Jenna Ward. I am a student of embodiment these past several decades and a devotee to the feminine. I'm constantly learning, but I've also been at this a little while. So I'm the founder of our school. I'm based between Australia and the Netherlands, and we were first established in 2018. That's when we took our first cohort through. So for the last coming up on 9 years, I've spent thousands of hours in my own embodiment practices, as well as with my private coaching clients, and then 1,000 more hours teaching these principles and supporting and mentoring those who have come to study with us here. And we have had around 900 participants over these last, coming up to 9 years, and they're from all around the globe. So we have participants from, like right now we have a current cohort that we're mentoring. They're from everywhere. North America, South America, Thailand, Australia, Palestine/Israel. They're from Kenya. They're from Sweden, Portugal, the UK. Like, we have participants who join us from all around the world. But what we all share in common and what we all have in common is that we are interested in, first and foremost, devoting to more of our own, embedding this deep feminine embodied way of being in our bones, and developing those tools professionally, which is a journey that I've been on. Many moons ago, I used to be a clinical hospital pharmacist, and I used to work in cardiology and cancer wards. And as I moved into middle management in that career, I was only in my 20s at that point, I started to think, like, is this what life is really meant to be about? Because my dissatisfaction with my work, with the health care that I was in, was making me sick. And I really wondered, like, where is this more? Where is this fully alive, more state of living? I want more freedom. I want more feeling. And I want an income that can keep me safe and stable in the world. So I studied transformation and a lot of different types of healing arts and modalities, looking for a way to still be in the healthcare realm, but in a more empowered way. And yet so many of the modalities that I studied were really conceptual, very in your head, even when they were very spiritual. And what I craved, what I really wanted, was to experience more ravishment and aliveness and vulnerability and intimacy and grittiness with like the textures of life, to come more fully alive. None of the modalities that I had learned were giving me that. So I began to explore and to play. By this time I had my own coaching practice. And I didn't really realize that what I was doing for several years with myself and with my clients was actually feminine embodiment. This is when it was much less of a word and a cultural movement. But I learned what I could, I trained where I could, and I continued to refine with myself and my clients. And at one point, a peer actually said to me, Jenna, what are you doing in your clinic over there? This is really interesting. Would you teach me this way of working? And so, I had no plans or designs to develop a modality, and feminine embodiment is timeless. But we have put some really clear structures, frameworks, languages, and tools in place so that we can access it ourselves more devotionally and support our clients to do the same. And that's how our coaching cert was born. So as a school, our headquarters is based near Noosa in Queensland, Australia. This is the traditional lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people. And this is where I work and practice and devote. But our community, as I've mentioned, is really widely international. And some of the members who come to join us are existing practitioners, some are new practitioners. All of them want to work, they want to leave behind from the neck up ways of working so that they can step deeper into vulnerability, into their own depths, and consistently feeling embodied, worthy, alive, full of pleasure, and magnetic within themselves. Some of these people are already practitioners, and so they want to weave these embodiment tools into their existing work as all kinds of things. Yogis, coaches, people who work in health, fitness, people who work in the creative arts, photography. While other members of our community haven't worked necessarily in this capacity before, they might not even be sure if they want to coach in a typical sense yet. They've got a curiosity to shift their mastery and a willingness to see where might these skills take me. And what we all really share, what holds or is the binding glue that we all are really here to devote to, is to navigate this nebulous inner world with more clarity and more precision. So we all want to deepen our own connection to our body, to really befriend it, hear our body voice, and inhabit more of this full spectrum feminine. This is the key devotion, because we got to walk that path ourselves first. But what our community is also really interested in is mastering the skills and the frameworks with proven methods, so we can take that same personal richness and have the language, have the potency, have the beautiful questions so that we can invite another body into that same experience. And this means we're cultivating language to communicate with clarity and with confidence. It means we're getting really precise about how to deliver rich client sessions that repeatedly work beautifully. And it also means that we're distilling the unique lived experience, identities, gifts, and flavor of us as a practitioner so that we can develop a signature body of work and become known for our unique mastery. No two of our coaches coach alike, or even in the same niche or field, because everyone through this experience really begins to stand out in the unique passion, the unique contribution, which helps to differentiate themselves if they're seeking to really cultivate a livelihood from this work. And at the end of the day, our practitioners are really interested in cultivating a really great livelihood where they can charge good money and build a thriving business that's rooted in emotional intelligence and a return to our deep feeling humanness, which is needed in the world. And it is such an honor to do this work. And we notice that the demand of it just keeps increasing. So we might ask the question, why are bodies waking up? Why are so many bodies waking up to the sacredness of embodiment, a curiosity towards somatics, the sacredness of sensation and feeling? I believe, our school believes, that it's not by accident that so many of us are called, awakened, curious about this deeper remembering, because we're all of us living inside a polycrisis, a political, environmental, humanitarian polycrisis at this point in our culture and in our collective world. And depending on the privileges and the identities that we hold, many bodies in different ways are not safe to thrive and to be ourselves fully. And so these times often ask of us and demand that we dissociate from our deep feeling, our deep feminine, as a way to stay safe, as a way to keep on, as a way to get by. And this means at this time, we are living inside an epidemic of disembodiment. Not because there is something inherently wrong with you or with I personally, but because the systems, the cultures, and the times that we're living in, and that we've been living in for the past 400 to 500 years, since the invention and exportation of colonialist capitalism, it has been about extracting from the body and extracting from Mother Earth instead of honoring it. And so I notice with the hunger for this work that many bodies are waking up and are curious about embodiment and somatics and the sacredness of sensation, because it's really needed. It is the rehumanizing balm that our bodies and our culture needs. I mean, I didn't wake up one day and think, gee, I'm going to quit this really well-paying job to become an embodiment coach and create a modality. There wasn't some very clear plan for me. I was following the curiosity, not knowing where it would lead, but knowing that there had to be more. And I think for us as to not get too existential, but for us as a species, we really do need to come back to the rehumanizing of really getting in contact with our feeling selves. And yet, because it's not linear, because it's less logical, it can feel kind of challenging to get your head around, well, what do we really mean when we say embodiment, when we say somatics? People banter these words around in a lot of different ways. So let's set the record straight and let's talk about, if all these bodies are waking up and if we're also curious about the embodiment, what exactly is it? Okay. So embodiment as a practice, it is timeless. Throughout centuries, many religious, indigenous, and spiritual traditions from across the globe have really celebrated the sacredness of the body, the awareness that the body holds as sacred. And so we could define embodiment as meaning very simply, deceptively simply, to live fully within yourself, within the body, to inhabit yourself fully. Let's just take a breath with that concept. To inhabit yourself fully. How might you adjust your body, the way you're seated, the shape you're taking right now? If you were to take a breath and settle into your hips and feel your base and notice feeling yourself more fully. When we do this, we're moving closer towards this most sincere version of ourselves, with the masks and the performance and the contortion to meet all the agendas and expectations of how we need to be, taking them all off so that we're no longer overriding our deep selves. And when we do this, it allows our more natural set point, our truer desire, nature, to bubble forth, to let that divine and sincere aspect move through your breath and your spine and the shape that you take and the way that you move through the world and express yourself and enter a room and call attention to what's important to you. And if we pause to consider how often today or this week you've been allowed to let this most true, most alive version of yourself out. To be embodied is to do that more of the time. And in order to cultivate this presence of self, this knowing of self, which is a level of knowing and contact with our desires, our truth, our sensitivity, and our power, which is very foreign for the majority of humans and the majority of women. To be embodied is to do that more of the time. And so in order to cultivate this more embodied, deeper presence, we need one key skill. And that skill is the skill of sensitivity. So sensitivity is our ability to feel our body, to come into contact with this subtle awareness. And every one of us has the ingredients for embodiment. That is, we have a body, we can feel it. But not all of us have the skill that is sensitivity. So here's a great analogy. Imagine that you're driving along in the car, you got the music turned up really loud. You've forgotten to put your seatbelt on though. So the car is alerting you with a really soft chime. Bing, bing, every few seconds. But you don't notice that soft chime because your awareness is on the loud, the gross, the busy thing that's taking up most of your consciousness. But suddenly that song ends. And a few moments ago, that little quiet alarm that you hadn't been hearing, all of a sudden, you can hear it. You've got the sensitivity now to hear, and take action. That will save your life according to that alarm. You put your seatbelt on. And this is sensitivity. When your awareness is tuned to the loud, gross, external noise, it drowns everything else. And you don't hear the more subtle cues that are actually trying to guide you and steer your actions. Our body is the same. And I know this because I was very disembodied for a lot of years, and no shame in that. Like, culture made me that way. So when we're going about our life and our awareness is attuned to the gross, the loud, the external, we don't experience that quiet spark of divine self, which we feel and experience through our internal senses. And when we're not open, when culture says, don't listen to that hysterical, erratic, intuitive, unreliable aspect of yourself, because that's less professional. That's less valuable. We not only don't hear that sensitivity, we consciously choose to numb it and turn the volume down until the point whereby we've lost the skill that is sensitivity. So without sensitivity, we can't necessarily go deeper into our embodiment. Now we can imagine this sensitivity as it exists inside of us as having degrees. There's the loud things that we can get sensitive to, like, oh, that coffee is hot. Ooh, somebody told me a strong criticism and I feel my gut react. Oh, I'm thirsty. Oh, I need to go to the bathroom. These are loud, obvious, tangible cues that our body is constantly giving us. And many of us ignore even these because within extractive capitalism, we need to get by. We don't have time to eat. We are scrolling and are dissociated as we have our lunch. We ignore going to the bathroom because, we've got something else and busier to do. This was me as a hospital pharmacist, very dissociated from even the loudest, most tangible cues of my body. And when we're not hearing and listening to this degree of inner body sensitivity and awareness, then the more subtle aspects of self, like there's just no hope of hearing them. Connecting to our desires. What is it that you want? What do you want to eat? What do you want to do? Connecting to our creativity. What's the unique spark of creative expression that you have? Because you have something in you. The full emotional range, the full range of our pleasure and aliveness and ravishment. Our magnetism, our desirability for ourselves and for life to penetrate us. These all exist along a spectrum. And when we turn down the volume on those gross or loud cues, when we turn down the volume on our sensitivity, and when we begin to ignore this dimension of us, to suppress it, to tell it, I don't want to hear what you have to say, our sensitivity diminishes and that seatbelt chime gets softer and softer and softer until it's so soft we can't feel ourselves anymore. And we think that the experience of that is numbness, is shallow living, is operating within like 20 to 30% of the bandwidth. And we may have softened that sensitivity because it was too painful to feel. It was too much to feel. It was culturally unprofessional to feel. There's a lot of really good reasons that we soften and silence that sensitivity. But at the end of the day, it's to our detriment. We are taught, all of us are taught, that this inner knowing and this inner sensitivity is irrational, unreliable, it is unprofessional, it makes us hysterical too much, And so it's culturally discouraged until it's diminished and silenced, and the volume of it is turned down to such a degree that we're going around the world wondering, who am I and what do I really want? Audre Lorde, beautiful feminist author and activist, said it best. Quote, "In order to perpetuate itself, every oppression must corrupt or distort those various sources of power within the culture of the oppressed that can provide energy for change." Embodiment says this sensitivity is not a burden. It is a gift. It is this divine knowing of how to inhabit self. And when we come back into contact with this inner knowing, the power, the beauty, the creativity, and the aliveness that it is, we come into contact with this phenomenal depth, which is just part of being human. Actually, we should all be in contact with it. Embodiment as a practice allows us to experience that inner universe, that inner spectrum with greater sensitivity, so that we can not only contact it in a moment of meditation or a moment of devotional practice, but that we can cultivate it and let it incarnate through our bones and our tissue, our voice and our flesh, so that when we go to a meeting, when we step into a conversation, when we are walking through the world, the way that we spend our time, our money, and our energy reflects much more of this truer self coming to the surface. And this is subtle work, but it is big work in a world that asks us to perform, to achieve, and to contort ourselves. In this way, I really believe that embodiment is it's a pretty revolutionary act. But it's also a return to our truest nature. Children, if you observe them, are naturally and effortlessly embodied. But as adults, we have forgotten this skill. So when we think about embodiment as a revolutionary act, we have to wonder, how is it so useful if we're interested in working with transformation, if we want to work with other people, other bodies? Why is embodiment so useful in the context of coaching and transformation and healing work? And the answer is that all of us are inherently powerful. If we define power as the ability to influence or control decisions or outcomes, we are each deeply powerful people. But when we can't contact that power, if it's not free to be contacted, felt, and then flow through us and out into our words and out into the world, then that power is stuck. So we don't stand up in the meeting. We don't exert our boundary. We don't influence situations in the way that we truly deeply want to. We can't put that power to use. So let's say we had a client that we were working with and they had a particular goal. They've got some undesirable situation and they want to move towards something that's better, more desirous. How are we going to support that client to reach their goal? Are we going to do some accountability coaching? Maybe put some dates in their diary? Like, here's where you can have that conversation. Here's where you can do that thing. Maybe we're going to do some mindset coaching to help them move from confusion to clarity. Mindset coaching can be useful. It deals with the mind, which is, about the 10% of us that exists from here up. So it's part of our being and it's valid. Not the whole story though. Or maybe we could do some type of talk therapy, which in large part can be very beneficial, of helping us to make meaning and understanding our past and how it influences our present, but doesn't always focus on the future and where we want to go. So we're still left with this question: how are we going to support our client to access their power and to let more of that true, powerful self flow out into the world? Well, I would suggest that power is a feeling. And the only way we can come into contact with it is to feel it. We can intellectually know it, but it doesn't become real. It doesn't fuel our actions until it is felt. So from a neuroscience point of view, so many modern approaches to growth, to development, to healing, to transformation are very much top-down approaches. They focus on what the brain already knows, the expectations that the brain already has, and then it creates understanding and makes meaning, moving from the top down, a head first direction. But if we want more power, and power is a feeling, and we can only feel things in the body, just like pain or love. We can't intellectualize these things. They're felt in the body. Then we need to come into contact with that power as a resource. We need to move it from the depths of our sensory data up and out into the world. And this reflects a bottom-up approach, which embodiment and somatic approaches are. So our approach here at the School of Embodied Arts is really depth first, direction second. Let's start with cultivating more inquiry and curiosity about the data, the raw data of what we're feeling, including where are we feeling powerful? Where are we feeling powerless? Where is it present? Where is it lacking? Where is it blocked? What's the story and the dynamic around that? And how does that shape how we move through the world? And from these explorations and inquiries, we can create new connections to our power. And this is why embodiment is so important, because through sensitivity, we connect to the inner treasure trove of resources that exist within us, our power, our aliveness, our pleasure, and so much more. So, if you have any questions or reflections on that and you're live with us, you can pop it in the chat. But next I want to move on to another kind of thread in the tapestry of this defining embodiment that it is important for us to talk about. And it's the difference between embodiment and somatics. So far I've been using these terms somewhat interchangeably. And you might have had the question yourself, like, what's the difference between embodiment and somatics? The short answer is they're the same thing. The long answer is they're actually really different. And if you're considering going deeper into your own experience, training and supporting others using embodiment and somatics, you want to know what those differences are so you can get a pulse check of what flavor is right for you. So here's a history lesson, real brief. We're going to do it in 2 minutes. We go into it in much more detail in our training. So the field of modern somatic works actually developed only in the 20th century, predominantly because of the Western experience of disembodiment. We're in this disembodiment epidemic. So in the term in 1970s, the term somatics was actually coined, and they defined somatics at that time as the study of the soma, namely the body as an experience from within. Now we've got to point this out because while here at our school we do honour the contributions and the work of the somatic practitioners from the 70s and beyond, somatics as a formalised field in the West has predominantly been based on a much more clinical background rather than resting into devotional roots. It's also been developed and codified by white Western men. At the same time, somatics isn't new. The principles and the practices of somatics are deeply rooted in Indigenous cultural and religious practices from all around the world, which long predate somatic science. So here at the school, we wish to honour this timeless wisdom, and this is why we refer to our work as embodiment, because it has much deeper devotional roots that we explore through ourselves and our own lineages to understand and connect into. On a personal note, embodiment was the word that kind of whispered with a curiosity to me for a long time before I became a practitioner in this field. And it's important to point these things out because people use the term embodiment, they use the term somatics, they use it to describe a mishmash of different modalities, but they're often doing it in a really clinical way that's more science-driven, dry, and devoid of vulnerability. And totally cool if that's your jam. You know, I have a background as a clinical pharmacist. I can geek out on the neuroscience of it, and we weave that into our training here. But we are also not only somatic sciencey, we're also really deeply devotional because we believe that coming home to the power, the sensitivity, the beauty, these are practices that are rooted in the body, but they also bring us into contact with something that is divine, this innate essential spark. And so when we practice embodiment, we're really drawing on the influences from the field of somatics, but also, you know, and that includes polyvagal theory and some of these underpinnings. We'll chat about them later, but it's also really devotional. And the type of devotion that we're cultivating is not one particular religion, ideology, or New Age form of spirituality. It is instead the universal force of the feeling flowing currents of aliveness that so much of our culture suppresses. So we're really interested in cultivating and embodying qualities like flow and intuition, cyclic aliveness, pleasure, and magnetism. And in a culture that celebrates more of the go, logic, linear, productivity, and efficiency, without getting into the details of it, by cultivating these qualities that are so absent in so much of our culture, what we're really cultivating is more embodiment of the feminine. And not all somatic tools are rooted in this level of devotion or this specific lens on the feminine qualities, which exist within all bodies of all gender. Here at our school, our experience is that this is what we're hungry to remember and to contact more of. A great example of that actually is one of our recent participants, DC, who studied with us in 2024. DC is an academic in the realm of gender and sexuality studies. And after a decade of feeling the call to do more vulnerability-based work, DC was at a crossroads. And instead of following the typical career advancement path for an academic, or staying trapped in a career identity that wasn't the perfect fit, DC followed their curiosity, and DC shared on our podcast. So in DC's own words, one of the most powerful outcomes was finding vulnerability as a tool, as a source of strength and power that allows us to be well with who we are. And so DC brought this into the classroom, inviting students to engage in their academic and sexual-based studies in different ways. But DC also went on to write a book, create a signature coaching work, and offer workshops, which were really about nourishing in a rhythmic flow based on these particular flavors and aspects of deeper embodiment. So now that we've clarified what is embodiment with quite a bit of detail, I hope that that has perhaps painted a clearer constellation of all the different ways you can do embodiment. Let's now shift into, well, what are the practitioner techniques that you actually need? And explore a few really practical ways that we do this. So, unfortunately, a lot of what's labeled embodiment or somatics out there in the world is not actually embodiment or somatics. Increasingly, people are taking concepts like breathwork, meditation, tapping, movement practices, and movement sequences, kind of putting them in a blender, blitzing them up, and then saying, come do a 3-month training in somatics. When what you're really getting is a month of breath work, a month of meditation, and a month of yoga. Now, these practices are all beautiful, beautiful modalities and practices, and you can do them in embodied ways, but they're not actually pure embodiment. So you can do these in embodied ways, but they themselves are not pure embodiment. If we're interested in doing pure embodiment or somatic work, it's concerned with a few key techniques. And these techniques are distinct to the modality that is embodiment. So I'm not going to read everything on the slide here, but a few points to highlight. Specific embodiment techniques that we need to know as embodiment practitioners include the ability to work with neuroception and creating safe space somatically, the ability to support our clients to interocept and somatically sense their body, to resensitize their body, to work with the pillars of embodiment and creating the conditions for vulnerability, to work with numbness, intentional and expressive movement, to titrate sensation, to work with attunement and resonance. And these are all distinct and important techniques for the standalone modality that is embodiment. And we need to be able to do this in our own bodies and have the language to invite other bodies into it. Now, of course, these sound, really complex and fancy. I want to remind us, children are effortlessly embodied. So yes, this is fancy. Yes, there is neuroscience and devotional underpinnings. There is really good evidence that this stands upon. And there are beautiful ways that we can cultivate this in our own body and with our clients. But at the end of the day, these techniques are actually a portal, a language, and a framework to remembering what you're already capable of, because you were effortlessly embodied as a child. Yeah. So as adults, we're kind of relearning and reblossoming into these skills. We're not going to teach you something you don't already know and you're not already capable of, but we will provide you a handbook, a how-to, and a safe space to cultivate that language, that framework, so you can guide yourself and guide other bodies. Now, whether we're new practitioners or whether we are practitioners who are adding into our skill set, these skills provide a really robust foundation for us to actually work with clients. And one example of this is one of our past graduates, Anna, who studied with us in 2018. Anna was really passionate about redefining business success, but didn't really have a business model, was just actually really curious about the subject. And Anna didn't expect to be interested in becoming a coach. It wasn't really on her radar. In fact, she's mentioned to me on the podcast, I never in a million years thought I'd become a coach. But Anna was really interested in supporting women in particular to redefine their success. And she wanted a business model that could actually support her. So when the possibility of coaching came along, Anna jumped in and found a set of structures that could hold her and take her from never having coached before to signing up her first client just 1 month after graduating from our school. And then Anna dialed in her skills and the value she was delivering with a number of one-on-one clients, and then launched a group coaching program and went on to work with more than 500 clients. Anna shared again on our podcast that FEC was one of the most transformative decisions that she had ever taken in her life. And it was a way for her to make a livelihood and continue to make a livelihood from her passions. So if these are the techniques that we're using during a client session, one of the next questions that I'm asked is, well, what does that look like? What does it look like to do this when you're actually sitting across from somebody? So if you're working as a coach, then that is a one-on-one, deep, intimate container. You might be sitting across from somebody, either in person or remotely, on your laptop from somewhere in the world, and you're in conversation with your client. It's a structured, potent conversation designed to surface new awareness and to address really specific and practical real-world challenges. At times, your client might have their eyes closed and their awareness tuned within. You'll be inviting your client to use breath and movement and sound. And that might be big or small. It might be more corporate or really expansive. And we have practitioners who work with the full spectrum. But the body is brought into the conversation. And this is a conversation. It's not talk therapy, but it is a conversation. And what we're not doing in this setting is we're not leading a movement class. We're not teaching a bunch of concepts, although you can take these principles and do that. You can take the concepts that we're exploring and you can teach a movement class. You can go and teach a bunch of concepts. We have a lot of past practitioners who translate this work into a lot of different ways of working. But we have to point this out because a lot of different embodiment and somatic trainings are actually facilitation and education trainings, where you're being supported or you're being taught to hold a group space, to share concepts or to teach. And that can be rich, but that's not coaching. So let's just break this down for a second. Because again, this is another really important constellation of possibilities to be across. So coaching, one-on-one, asking questions. We are following the client towards their very specific future-focused goals. That's different to facilitation, where you maybe have a small group or a large group. The facilitator is setting the pace. The facilitator is offering the prompts. And it's not about one person's goal, one person's very practical real life situation. It's about a theme or an exploration to explore. And that is again different to an educator role, where you can share theory and concepts, where you can share facts. All of these have a very different level of intimacy and also really different client volumes and price points associated with them. So looking at the embodiment industry more widely, coaching is a higher ticket, meaning it's a higher price point investment where you have a lower number of clients. So you don't have to have such a big audience. And that's different to facilitation or education, where you generally are selling things at a lower price point, and so you need a higher volume of clients in order to generate or replace an income. Now, this doesn't make one better or worse, they're just very different. A lot of the practitioners who come to work with us are interested in coaching because they want to do the deepest, most intimate work and have an offer that is a higher price point. But they do still take the principles and the philosophies and use them in group containers, use them to share and educate, which is absolutely possible. We love one-on-one coaching, and I love one-on-one coaching personally because it's a really deep, intimate level of service. It's also really profitable, and it's a beautiful intimacy. I think it's a powerful way to really master your art. So many practitioners that we work begin working in one-to-one and then branch out into other ways as their audience and their desire to share their work blossoms. But because it's so intimate, because doing good coaching is so intimate, you have to be responsive to the particular client, the identities, the challenges that that client is facing. It can sometimes be really hard how to figure it out. If you don't just want to lecture them, give advice, tell them what worked for you, like actually having the language and know where to move and how to maneuver so that they can surface some new awareness can be kind of challenging. I know it certainly was for me. And I hear this a lot from people who come to study with us. These are the kinds of challenges that they tell me that they have. They say, I've got the passion for this, but I don't have the language to take it a layer deeper. I know how to follow my intuition, but I don't have a solid base of knowledge behind that. And I want to move past giving advice or sharing my story because I realize it's not going to fit for people with different life experiences or identities. And what I want to do is a more mature, valuable way of serving my clients. And so when we're sitting in these kinds of challenges, there's a few different ways that we might hold ourselves back. The first is we might hold ourselves back if we're still searching for the language, the frameworks, and the tools. So you might know what's worked in your own body, but if you're going to ask somebody to hand on heart pay you thousands of dollars for a really valuable outcome for them, you really need to know that the tools and the frameworks that you're offering work. They work reproducibly. They work no matter who is sitting opposite you. They work no matter what the circumstances that that person is facing. And we find so many women are really called and inspired to step into service, but there is the skills, the frameworks, and the structures are not kind of tangible, solid, and robust enough for them to hand on heart sit in that place and say, this is a service that is worth hundreds and thousands of dollars. And it is required if you want to create a livelihood out of that, to have that level of value and confidence in what you're offering. And so that's where we go, and that's what we do together. Another common challenge that people share is the fear of doing harm unintentionally. So we want to be of service, but we're mindful that going into the body can be vulnerable. What if somebody's experienced trauma? How do I make sure that I'm working in a responsible scope? So our school is a trauma-sensitive training. We are very aware that many clients, people of different lived experience and identities, may have a history of trauma. And while we're not trauma-centric, which is about focusing on the acute healing, resolution, and dealing with the after effects of trauma, we're also not trauma uninformed. Trauma uninformed at the other end of the spectrum just kind of ignores that that could be possible. It doesn't really talk about it or acknowledge it or how to work with it, which can be harmful. Yeah. So we sit in the middle. We're not focusing on trauma. We're focusing instead on growth, but we acknowledge that different types of trauma may arise as we work deeply and through the body. And so we draw on Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, the science of feeling, and safety, which underpins our modality. And that means there's a whole heap of skills and techniques that responsible embodiment practitioners should have in order to make sure they're working in responsible ways. Again, I'm not going to read all these out, but some of them include making sure that we have a defined scope of practice and an established coaching container. It includes working with internal and external resources of safety, practicing non-imposition, non-agenda, being really specific with instructional and invitational language, being able to co-regulate, work with memories in a safe and somatic way, and most importantly, being able to titrate meat avoidance strategies and co-regulate with our clients if and when things begin to shift beyond their window of tolerance and into something that could escalate to become harmful. So this is a really important aspect, because if we want to go all in doing deep embodiment work, but we're holding back from fear of doing harm, we're not going to be doing our best work. We need to know how to go deeply, safely, responsibly. And the final dimension to this that participants also share that they're really interested in and mindful of is that they want to do deep work, but they want to also make sure that they're doing it in culturally sensitive and inclusive ways. So they don't want to impose their own beliefs and biases and assumptions onto clients. And this aspect is largely missing in so many curriculums that I see, because your clients will hold different identities and come from different cultural backgrounds. So we want to know how to work with them within a context that includes foundational DEI knowledge, that is comfortable discussing cultural, historical, and generational contexts, and that invite our clients' unique culture and identity into the conversation, because it's part of their connection to their power, their body, and ultimately their desires, where they want to get to. So where this lands us is in this particular modality. We are an embodiment modality, a modality that is based on purely somatics, the science of somatics, but also the long-term underpinning that embodiment has existed as a devotional practice. We're interested in cultivating sensitivity to a feminine flowing quality. So that is cyclic power, more pleasure, more magnetism. As a school, we are nervous system informed and polyvagal aware, so that we can do deep work with less harm in trauma sensitive ways, and so that we can invite our clients' identity and culture in a culturally inclusive way. So with these underpinnings, combined with, as we'll speak a bit later, your unique lived experience and the unique contribution you're here to make, no two coaches that graduate from our school are doing the same work. Just last week, I caught up with a few of our past graduates who are working in reconciliation post-divorce, communication in relationships, career navigation for burnt out women in corporate, women who are in midlife wanting to reconnect with their intuition, women in midlife who are transitioning into a more pleasure and aliveness-full next chapter, and so many more. We have coaches who work in dating and divorce and mothering, who work in climate, existential, activism type roles. The spectrum is so wide of lived experiences and passions. We have people who take this modality and work with it through photography and personal training and into their corporate realms. In medicine, we have a number of people who have studied medicine with us who infuse it into their practice, as doctors, as physiotherapists, as occupational therapists, as massage and body workers. So although we're all learning these same underpinning principles, philosophies, framework, and language, the way that your unique flower blossoms is going to be totally different in its smell, in its quality, in its unique beauty compared to how anybody else might manifest these same skills. So before we take the final piece of our exploration today, which is a tour of the back end of our school and a little bit more detail around the curriculum, if what we've discussed so far has resonated with you, the doors are open right now for our October 2026 cohort for the Feminine Embodiment Coaching certification. And for those who join us during the month of August 2026, we have two bonuses that we're able to offer. We're offering an extended 9-month payment plan for those who join us this month. We're also offering a private coaching session with me, Jenna Ward. So this group, our October cohort group, is already convening. They're already diving into their self-study now and beginning to move through some of the curriculum and the devotional practices. And so they're getting extra time with the material, an extended payment plan, and some private coaching with me. If you're called to deepen your own professional embodiment skills, and to also go deeper into your own practice, and you want some extra time to study or a longer payment plan or a private coaching session with me, and we'd love to invite you to chat, and I'll pop the link in the comments. I'll also pop it below this video recording. You can chat with myself or our enrollment coordinator, Shay, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, just so you feel really well informed about who we are and if this is the right space for you. So now that we've spoken about the October cohort, let's tour the back end of our curriculum and have a tour of our school. Over the past years, we've supported, as I've mentioned, around 900 past participants, and I don't do that alone. So we have a small team that works to train and support. On our team, we have Shay, our enrollment coordinator, who you would speak with, either Shay or myself if you're interested to come study with us. There's myself, Jenna. I teach, mentor and coach inside the program, as well as Kate Mealis, also based in Australia, who's been teaching with our school since 2019. We also have a number of community mentors and guest teachers who teach inside the training. Okay, so the work of our past participants and graduates really says it best, and you can find some of those over on our website at our Find a Coach directory. Again, I'll pop the link to that here in the chat, but it's over at jennaward.co/feminine embodiment coach directory, and you can find that on our website as well. It's a great place to see what people are doing with this modality. Okay. So the program itself is a 6-month program. It kicks off in October, though between now and then, participants who are joining us for October get early access to the curriculum so they can start some self-study. The program is live, meaning we have a discrete group of probably around 30 participants who are moving through those 6 months together at the same time. So you'll get to know your peers, you'll see familiar faces, you'll swap coaching with a group who are moving through the materials in a live way, interactive and together. And we find that this is a really beautiful, kind, vibrant community of both mentors and participants. Our core curriculum and the core journey that we're going on is 6 steps. We start with embodiment and the feminine foundations. So this is a lot about what embodiment is, what the feminine is, devotional practices so that we can enter into that with more sensitivity. We then move into exploring the dynamics of shame, vulnerability, and power, learning to liberate more of our power, come into contact and work with vulnerability, and transforming or alchemizing any shame, not enoughness or containment of ourselves into something more powerful and enlivening. In Module 3, we work with boundaries and the journey of identity deaths and rebirths and becoming new versions of self, which is a really important archetypal journey that we will go on and that our clients regularly will be going on to birth new aspects of our identity and our becoming. In Module 4, we focus on pleasure and sensual aliveness. And this is a question that I get a lot. So this pleasure and sensual aliveness is really about being alive and ravished by life in the everyday. So we're not talking here about bedrooms, orgasms, or sexuality through intimate partnership. Although you can take these principles and very much apply it to those realms, which a lot of our past graduates do. Here we're talking about the kind of pleasure which is not a performance, and sexuality which doesn't have to end in orgasm. We're instead speaking about these qualities as everyday currents of life force that want to be moving through you. And so this type of pleasure and sensual aliveness is something that all bodies can cultivate, and that is relevant in every aspect of how we work. We then move into magnetism and polarity, calling in our desires and working with the body as a place for receptivity and cultivating more of a charge and an attracting quality. So these first 5 modules are really based on practitionership, and as we move through each of those modules, those first 5 modules, we're gaining new skills, frameworks, language, and underpinning philosophy in each of those. So each of those first 5 modules will have a very detailed personal mastery and devotional stream, theory stream, and coaching stream, so that we're doing the work on ourselves, so that we're understanding why it works, the theory underpinnings, and so that we can then actually support and guide another body through that. Our 6th module, though, is a little bit different. Our 6th module is about embodied entrepreneurship. And in this 6th module, we're really focusing on feminine leadership and business basics. Things like insurance and indemnity, but also how to get your first 2 to 3 clients enrolled and what kind of expression or website logistics you might need to make that happen. So the way the program delivered and that we move through these 6 core modules over 6 months is really live and vibrant. We've got a full roster of regular live community calls to suit all time zones, as well as small group mentoring, where you come together with a dedicated mentor, myself or one of the other teachers, and together with a group of peers, we experience, do, and refine our coaching together. We also have small peer support groups where you can come together with other people in your time zone to swap coaching, and a virtual community where you can stay connected and ask as many questions as you desire. So as we move through these first 5 modules, these first 5 months together, each month we're gaining additional coaching frameworks. We're gaining different tools to liberate and work with resistance patterns. We're gaining tools to work with different shifting roles, to work with pleasure, to work with magnetism, and so much more. And we put all those tools into practice as we keep building our practice through this small group mentoring. So you're not left on your own. There is a self-study component, but you're not left on your own to figure it out. Vulnerability, being witnessed and being mentored is how we build our confidence. And so by the time you're ready to graduate, if you desire to formally graduate, we want you to feel incredibly confident and have received that feedback from peers and mentors that know you're doing exceptional work. And that's where we want to head to together. So if you're interested in joining us for the October cohort, I would warmly invite you to check out the curriculum or to book a call and chat with our teaching team. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. And I'll be hanging around for the next 5 minutes or so. So if you do have any further questions, you can pop them into the chat. I also had 1 or 2 that were emailed through beforehand from people who are going to catch the recording. So I'll take a moment to answer those now. But in advance, thanks so much for joining and learning about the School of Embodied Arts. We would love to work with you if you're feeling the call. Happy to answer any questions that you have. And equally so, if this is not the perfect fit training for you, I hope that mapping the different constellation of possibilities and where you might sit as an embodiment or somatic practitioner has been really helpful. Gosh knows the world needs more of this work. So just wishing everyone here so much success with your next steps on your path. Okay, so a few questions here. I received a great question from Janice. Janice asked, how do you support BIPOC in our work within and outside of our own communities? So we support and have a lot of participants who identify as women of colour, I'll refer to them as. And there's a few ways that we support women of colour in particular to do this work. So first up, we do offer partial scholarships to women of colour to the training. We want to see more women of color have their voice and express as leaders in this space. And so we have a number of partial scholarships available for the October cohort. If financial access is something that some support would be helpful in, so that you can get in to do your work, because we acknowledge your voice is important. Once we're inside the training, we have a really diverse community, both in terms of race, but also location, lived experience, religion, sexual identity, orientation, neurodivergence, and sensory processing. A very vast spectrum of humans and identities with us in the training. And one of the important things that this experience is about cultivating is it's about cultivating your relationship with that lived experience and your power in it, so that you can distill your unique contribution and what the gift of that lived experience is. And so our job is to support you with not only your coaching skills, but the distillation of the unique message and gift that you're here to share. And very often, not always, but very often, we find that women of color who are wanting to work with communities, either communities who have similar or different identities, cultivating conviction in that message and that unique, we call it a signature body of work, is a really important aspect of the work. We do this in a way that's really culturally inclusive, and that also considers and unpacks the history of disembodiment and what that is like for different bodies of different identities. If we're wanting to support a more embodied future for a particular identity group, we can only do that with the context of how we got to that point and a wider systemic analysis. So you'll find inside this training that we have a systemic analysis looking at, well, what are all of the different factors that might contribute to our embodiment, so that we're not gaslighting our clients inadvertently, and so that we can really cultivate in a culturally inclusive way your voice and your conviction in your voice. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Another question that I received via email ahead of time was asking, I'd like to know what's the difference between this program, Feminine Embodiment Coaching, compared with a facilitator training that's very focused on sexual healing and relationships. And this is a great question. So the Feminine Embodiment Coaching certification is my expertise and what I can speak to. And when we think about the particular speciality of this training, you can really think about this as the bedrock of embodiment. This is a pure embodiment training, and you can use the frameworks and the tools in this training combined with any area of interest. So if your area of interest is sexual energy or relationships or grief after the loss of a loved one, or building an embodied business, or supporting women of color to advocate for themselves in a corporate setting, like whatever your thing is, you can take these skills and you can blend them with any area of interest that you have. And the core frameworks that we teach through the first 5 modules of the training are frameworks that work for everybody of every identity, of every gender, in every setting. So it becomes a very flexible modality that you can really make your own. And we've had past participants who started off working in dating and then moved into things to do more with like fashion and expression of self. We've had people who started off working with career transitions and then transitioned into using the same set of skills, but using them for supporting new mothers who are also small business owners. Like really niche stuff, but the core bedrock is the exact same thing. And this is really unique to this particular modality, that it can grow with you and evolve with you, whatever your interest or topic or focus is. But this means you will need to bring some of your own flavor to this. So if sexual energy is something that you specifically want to learn the ins and outs of, you won't get that here. Yeah. And you are better off going and taking a specific training in sexual energy. But if sexual energy is something that you already know about and that you're interested in cultivating more devotion with, and that you want to bring your unique voice to, you can take your lived experience and blend it with this bedrock of a modality to create your work. And this is the case for so many of our practitioners. I was chatting with one of our past graduates who has a thriving business just yesterday, and her work focuses on communication in relationships. Now, she didn't learn how to communicate in relationships from our school specifically. She learnt the bedrock of the modality. And with this as her lived experience and topic of interest, she brought that along and she blended those pieces together to create something really new. So this is not a specific training to teach you the ins and outs of sexual energy. We work with life force energy, connection with power, pleasure, and magnetism. And they are the same thing, just pointed in different directions. Yeah. We are not a specific training to teach you about how to have an excellent relationship, though a lot of our graduates work in the realm of intimacy and relationship because that is where their lived experience lends itself. What I would suggest if there is a specific area of training that you have, which you are clueless and have no life experience in, that you want to focus on, then you should go get that specific training. But if you already have lived experience, you've got some years or some highs and lows under your belt, and you just need the bedrock foundation and tools, well, let's blend those things together because that might be the unique flower that you're ready to fully blossom into. So I hope that clarifies. And again, if you have any further questions, you're really welcome to chat with myself or our enrollment coordinator, Shay, or pop us an email so that we can just help you be really well informed and find the best path for you moving your passions forward. Thanks so much for joining us for today.